Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Very warm welcome. Welcome in the Balie. Welcome in this special night with Paul Murray. My name is Tim Wagemakers. I'm a journalist, and I'm quite happy to be your host tonight because I've been living inside this book for the past month, and it's a real pleasure to talk about this book tonight. And we're going to do that with a special guest. It's not a surprise, as you know. All the way from Ireland. He's the author of novels as Skippy Dies and The Mark and the Void. And today we're here to talk about a book that won the Irish Book Award as Novel of the Year in 2023, the Nero's Book Award, and that has been shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Good to know this talk has been organized with Meridian Publishers, where The Bee Sting has been published, and translated into Dutch by Dirk-Jan Aresman. And I think always on literary nights we forget about the translator, and Dirk-Jan is sitting there, so give him also a very warm round of applause for such an amazing job. But now, without further ado, let's give a very warm welcome to the author, Paul Murray. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. I was doing some research and on some interviews you did, and I was like, okay, there's quite some pressure because I saw you were interviewed by Dua Lipa.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was very intense.
Yeah.
I can't remember any of it. It was just like this blur. I was just talking and talking and talking. You know.
Yeah.
Can't remember what I said.
Yeah.
You know, I love you, Dua Lipa. I think I said over and over. Yeah.
Well, you're gonna have to put up with me tonight.
I love you, Tim.
So how are you doing? Because you've been in the Netherlands for quite a few days now. You're gonna stay until Wednesday, I believe.
Yeah. I was in Brussels over the weekend for the Passaporta Festival, and then I came to Amsterdam last night.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been here since 2011, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're gonna be roaming around the coming days.
I don't know about roaming, but I'll certainly be, located in the city.
Yeah. You're going to be located. Yeah. There's always a big schedule, right? Yeah. Just to get a glimpse of the audience we're with, who has read the book The Bee Sting? Let's just do the.
Oh wow.
Good. Yeah. I think you came to the right place. And who is currently still reading? Yeah, a few. You're over halfway. No? Yes? Okay. You're going to learn quite some things tonight. I'm not sure we're going to be able to keep it all spoiler-free, I guess. Very good that you're all here. It's the story about the Barnes family. Yeah? It's about Father Dickie, Mother Imelda. We have the oldest daughter, Cass, son PJ. We have Victor, the prepper. And we have Big Mike, of course, and so many other characters. Just to start, you've been telling this story quite a few times now, but how do you begin with such a rich and layered book as this?
Firstly, thanks to everybody for coming along tonight, and thanks, Tim, for doing the interview. It's like books. So I often quote this John Lennon line: "Life is what happens when you're making other plans," and like books are kind of like the two. So I had this idea for a short, funny, romantic comedy. Yeah, set in Dublin, and that I had every good intention of writing that book. I had a contract to write a short, funny book, and I remember well, like my editor coming to London after I'd spent about 2 years. I was about 2 years in, and he was saying, "And how's it going?" I said, "Like, it's not that short.
Yeah,
it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
You know."
When did you tell them that it was going to be a bit bigger?
The editor, my editor in London, he's always just been like really behind everything that I do. Or my agent put it another way. She just said like, he doesn't care, just write. So when I finished my third book, I spent about 2 years working on a screenplay for a film. And I felt it was the longest I'd gone without writing fiction for ever, I think, in my career. And I wanted to start something, but I was feeling quite kind of anxious about doing it. So I had these 3 different ideas. And I was really interested in each idea, these 3 different, completely different novels. And one of them was this kind of like virtual reality odyssey, and one was kind of an inner city crime story, and one was this romantic comedy set in Dublin. And I wrote I was just compiling notes for about 6 months. I was getting ideas for each idea, and I'd have like sort of 60 pages of notes for each one, but I couldn't pull the trigger. I was kind of nervous, I think, after not writing for so long, and I wanted to try and be sure that whatever I chose, it was right. It was like it was going to work, which you can't do with a book really. So eventually, I went to London and I met the editor, and I'd written sort of 3 treatments for the books that I was doing, and he said, "Virtual reality book, you will never finish this novel." He said, like, everything you do is like 600 pages long. This book is going to be like 3,000 pages long. Okay. So you can't do it today. Yeah. He said, "Inner city crime story. My wife will not read this book." That was his. Which is his benchmark. Yeah, well, that's his. It was really interesting. Like, he was very, he said, if she'll pick that up in the shop and she won't read it, So that was the end of that. And then he said, this romantic comedy set in Dublin, do that one because it's short and you can turn it around quickly and then you can move on to something else. And I'd done so much work on the preparation that I went home kind of rubbing my hands thinking all I have to do is it's like I'd done the outline and all I had to do was color it in. Like, I had all the scenes worked out and I had the characters and I had like bits of dialogue, and so it should have been easy, but it's the strangest thing. Like, it was when I sat down to write it, and I write everything by hand. So I'd taken notes on the computer and then I started like writing, page 1. And like almost immediately I just thought, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. It was like the air going out of a tire, cyclists, you're all familiar with that depressing feeling of inexorable, doom. But it was just like, after like page 5, it was just like, I just didn't want to do it. And I think partly I'd over-prepared. I always tell my students, you can't, if you can kill something if you sort of over-plan. There has to be room to kind of. Because it also sounds a bit like you've already written a few books, you were working on screenplay, and then you're like, okay, now I'm going to start the next book, and this is the sort of assignment, and I'm going to do it and finish it, and then you feel like, but this is not the book that I want to write. Yeah, well, see, the thing about screenplays is that screenplays are so different to writing novels, and my entire experience of writing the screenplay was the producers telling me this is not like writing a novel. Like, it's all strategic, it's all planned, it's very scientific, and any romantic ideas about like inspiration or sparks or ideas that come out of nowhere, they don't exist in screenwriting. Certainly not that with that experience. So I was kind of still in that mode where I thought, I can plot the whole thing out, and but I didn't. I mean, it was kind of fortunate I didn't write that book, because like it was going to be a romantic comedy, boy and a girl, set in Trinity College in Dublin, and like 1 year later, Sally Rooney published Normal People, which was like a boy and a girl in Trinity College Dublin, and she did reasonably well with that book. So mine was more sort of like abnormal people, just like aberrant people, but I wasn't feeling funny. Like, I wasn't feeling like when I was writing it, like, it had some good jokes, but it felt like something that was kind of removed from my own feelings or experience, like something I was just doing as a job, kind of a thing. And like books, you can write a screenplay very quickly. Books take a long time, and if it's something that you're not sort of engaged with in some more meaningful way than just like getting paid, then it's not going to carry you through. It's not going to carry you through like the 5 years of ups and downs and loss of faith and stuff. So basically, so I just stopped, and I was kind of worried for a while, but I was always interested in the girl part of the boy-girl romance. This girl, Cass, from this little Midlands town. And so many people had told me stories. Books are so. There's this great W.B. Yeats poem called "The Circus Animal's Desertion," And it's about like sort of when you've run out of inspiration, you know. So W.B. Yeats had done pretty well when he wrote that poem. He may have won the Nobel Prize at that point, I can't remember. But he talks about like the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. Like, so basically like you go right down into the gutter, and like the things that start like a book or a poem, whatever, they're so ephemeral and small and insignificant, they seem like nothing. But like these tiny little stories people had told me about. I had a friend who worked in the car industry. I had a friend who had a crazy accident on her wedding day with a bee. And I had a few friends who had married girls from the Midlands and would tell me these hilarious stories about you know, going to these towns. So I started writing that instead, and it was like this, like the best part of writing sometimes is that first draft, when it's all kind of unfolding before your eyes. And it's like when The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy's to the house lands and she gets out of the house, and like this just insane world is just like unrolling.
But how did it work for you? Because you started writing about Cass, and then the story unfolded from there. But how does that work? Do you put up big schemes on your wall, like, okay, this is the family relations? Did you know the story, how it was going to end, and then you started writing from the beginning? How does it work for you? Because when you start with that story and end up with something like this, you want to keep track of what you're doing, right?
Big time. Yeah. But it's a weird sort of paradoxical situation where it's all very intuitive, and at the same time there's a lot of planning. But it's like, if you're planning a novel, it's like drawing a map of a place you've never been to, you know? It's sort of pointless, you know? But so you're drawing a map, and then you're walking into the place that you're trying to map, and so you're rewriting the map all the time. So it's this constant schizoid dialogue between the plotting part of your brain and the whatever, the more emotive or creative part of the brain. But like if the voice is strong, then the story kind of tells itself. You know, you're kind of, it sounds sort of mystical, but it's not like it. But you're just trying to listen to the characters and let them. Yeah. So I might have an idea for where it would go. So in the comic phase of the book, the stuff that was jettisoned, like I wanted Cass to have this dad who was a prepper. He got into prepping, and that was kind of a comic idea to me, because prepping is inherently comical. So I knew that Cass and her dad, like that was going to be like a central relationship in the book, and I thought like the prepping thing, I can still use that. That's something that'll work. But then it just unfolded. Like it got to a point quite quickly where I realized I couldn't use Cass to tell the whole story, and I started bringing in the members of the family as well. But then when I brought them in, that opened new directions, you know. So new ideas came to me for like, oh my God, like, well, if Imelda's got a voice, then what's she going to say? So it just kind of took off and kept growing and growing.
We're going to dive into the topics and the characters, but maybe also, what is this book for you in your career as a writer? Because there's so much in there about Dublin, there's so much in there about the places you live, you visited, you studied. There's also so much in there about Ireland, with all the economic boosts that were there, and then the drainage of all that economic surplus and the poverty that resulted. What does this book mean for you in the context of what you've been writing so far? Because it's such a saga, it's such a big story you're telling about a family in Ireland, in the Midlands.
What do you mean? What do I mean?
I mean, for you as a writer, this is your fourth book. Yeah. It's such a big saga. It turned out to be. How does it resonate with your life and your experiences growing up?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm really interested in like the empires falling. So to quote Yeats again, things fall apart. That's a quote you see a lot these days. There's a great book by Jared Diamond called Collapse, which is about it's a series of examinations of different civilizations in history which destroyed themselves by cutting down their trees. I sort of like, so I think sort of what I find myself coming back to again and again is this idea that we don't know what we're doing, but we're very good at convincing ourselves that we do, you know? And to a certain degree, you need to convince yourself that you know what you're doing in order to live your life. But at the same time, in the same way that I can't trust my plot outline because it's a map of a place I've never been to, you can't really believe your own whatever ideology that you're sort of pinning your flag to. So that's something that was kind of borne out really literally and vividly in Ireland with this like insane economic roller coaster that we were on since. I'm not going to bore everyone with the economics, but basically Ireland, when I grew up, very poor, everybody left. Suddenly in the mid-90s, massive influx of American pharma companies, American IT, American banking, which Trump's now planning to pull the plug on all that. And so everyone at home is like freaking out. What's going to happen? Is it today? Is it tomorrow? I can't remember, like Liberation Day for Trump. Anyway, so Ireland suddenly became very, very rich. And this phenomenon had the unfortunate name of the Celtic Tiger. And what it meant was that for the first time, like really in Ireland's history as an independent state, that people didn't have to leave. People could get jobs, get good jobs in Ireland where they lived. So there was a lot of great things that happened with that economic change. The Catholic Church simultaneously, all of these stories about sexual abuse started to come out. So there was this kind of really bizarre. It was like a fairy tale, you know, like it was a total shift in registers between the way that people behaved, between the way people, how they thought of themselves, moved from being like sort of very devout but sort of poor to like nakedly capitalistic, you know. And then it all went south when it turned into a property bubble. When the crash came in 2008, everyone was wiped out, and the country became sort of very difficult. Circumstances became difficult. And so all that stuff like is really meaningful to me, I guess. Like everything I write is meaningful to me, or I wouldn't write it. This book, like I really, I feel a lot of love for the characters, I guess, you know, I miss them.
Yeah. Is there one you're especially fond of?
It's like kind of books are like your kids, you know? Like my kid is like my kid, but like books are sort of like, so it's,
but I mean, parents sometimes do have a favorite child. They will deny it, but they do.
I've got like one kid, and my son is always going, like, don't have another kid. I guess like Cass, because I started with Cass, and she's probably a lot like I was when I was a teenager, in that she's very shy and sort of pessimistic, but she covers it up with this kind of veneer of lacerating sarcasm. So PJ I love because he's a believer, like he believes in the family. He wants everything to stay together. The others want it just to stop. Imelda, because that's my favorite part of the book. And Dickie, because I think, like, as a middle-aged man, it's just, you know, you have such a different perspective on. It's such a trite thing to say, like, but when you get to like I'm going to be 50, like, are we in April? Is this April?
Tomorrow's
April. Okay, so like next month I'm going to be 50. So buy me a drink tonight if you like. But you start. My friend was at a 50th, and he said, like, the birthday boy said to him, you know, he was having a drink, and he said, like, 50, halfway there. So when you're halfway there, you know, and you know, you realize you're never going to be like an NBA basketball player. You're never going to be like a...
That's settled in at the age of 50. Yeah.
Well, I'm not 50 yet. I'm not 50 yet. So like, there's still there's still 4 hours left.
Yeah.
So you start to look at your life sort of retrospectively and realize that, like, you know, all the roads you didn't take. And like my life has been lucky in that I've been blessed enough to write books for a living, but you know, like it's impossible not to get to this point and feel like regrets. So I love Dickie too, even though Dickie's, I think, the most he's the most problematic character in the book in lots of ways, and he's the person from whom all of the trouble flows. Like, everything is kind of his fault, unfortunately. But I think it's his fault because he's trying to be someone else's idea of a good person. You know, I think everyone in the book is just trying to be someone else's idea of a good person, and instead of being who they are.
Yeah. You see them wandering and getting lost and trying to find a home, actually, also. Huh?
Sure.
Yeah. We're going to broaden the discussion a bit more and invite two people to join us to talk about the book. They've both read the book. And we're going to talk with Maaike Meijer. She is an emeritus professor of gender studies, a biographer and publicist, has written extensively on literature, popular culture, feminism and gender theory. And in 2023, she published Radeloze Helden, a critical yet empathetic exploration of masculinity in literature and film. Give her a warm welcome. And she is going to be joined by Charlotte Remarque. She is editor at the Groene Amsterdammer, where she writes reviews and essays. And she's also the host of the successful literary podcast Boeken FM. Also give her a warm welcome. Yeah, welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Maybe just to start off, this is the compliment part. This is going to be fun. Maaike, Charlotte, what was the experience of you both reading the book? If I start with you, Maaike.
Well, I think it was an unput-downable book. I really was very gripped from the beginning. It is a multi-perspective novel. So all the time you move from one character to the other, and you get everybody's views on the same events. But it's one surprise after the other, really. I have enjoyed it greatly. I could not believe that you started out to write a romantic comedy, as you told us, because I experience it as a Greek tragedy. It's this inevitable rush to the fatal end, which I found very, very dramatic. So I couldn't find anything humoristic in this book. Okay.
Actually, I had the opposite experience where I had so many moments where I was laughing out loud. I was having a great time with the book, and I thought it was really funny. But I was only halfway through, and then I decided to Google Paul, and I ran into an interview he did with a Dutch newspaper, and there's just a picture of him looking very sad. And then above the article, it's like, this book is all about death and about the end and about people being terrible towards each other. And then I still had to finish the rest of the book, so I knew what I was in for. But I enjoyed it very much because I love a large family novel. I think as a plot point, the fact that you're doomed to be related to one another, that you cannot escape the family, and in this case, the family curse, is so fascinating. It always grips me. So I had a great time with the novel. I thought it was beautiful.
I also read the Volkskrant article, and I also read The Guardian, where you said, so I was just wondering how that's for you. You said, okay, the book is also, I could dump all my sadness into the book and then go off, have a sandwich and be fine. Can you reflect a bit on that? Also with the remark that Charlotte said, that on the one hand, you put so much grief and death in your books. It's a recurring theme, and you were saying that it's also becoming a more recurring theme. Can it be more recurring? It's becoming even more dominant in the books.
In the books? No, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I think there's always, like, Skippy Dies is like about Skippy dying. So there's like, it's definitely about death. I think, like, I'm interested in death. It seems superfluous to say, like, I'm interested in death. You know, if you're writing a novel, like Thomas Pynchon, my hero, said, like, that's, you know, every adult novel is about mortality. Like, that's just what it's about. I just find myself, like, drawn to, I guess, like, when I was trying to sort of, I'm trying to pivot between talking to you and these guys.
Focus on the audience.
So, like, when I was talking about, like, you know, we're all kind of trying to construct some way of, like, living meaningfully that makes, like, life seem like some kind of coherent enterprise. And, you know, we all think, whatever way that we do it, like death is the thing that is a wrecking ball that comes in and smashes that. So, like, you know, whatever kind of person you are, you know, there's nothing that you can buy on Amazon that will help you, you know, when someone close to you dies. Yeah. And that's, as a culture, is something that we are not so good at dealing with, I think, anymore. Like, Ireland changed a lot in the last sort of 20 years, and some of those changes have, like everywhere else, have pushed people further apart. And when the wrecking ball hits, and like maybe it's death, but maybe it's something else, like losing a job, or losing a species or a climate, whatever it might be. That's when you realize what it is that makes your life work and makes you who you are, which is to say your relationships with other people. So sorry, just it's my ramble, but in terms of the humoristicness of it, if I may. It was funny. Some of the reviews would go like, this book is like just super sad, incredibly sad, and some books go like, this is an absolute hoot. It's like Garfield or something like that. Sometimes it seems like tragic comedy is like mixing those registers. Kind of people sort of tend to want to weigh it on one side or the other, but I think the comedy works for me. It works as a way to make it surprising when the darkness hits, So if you look at, I always think of Samuel Beckett, like with Waiting for Godot, which is everybody familiar with Waiting for Godot? So it's about these two tramps waiting for this man who's going to save them from everything, called Godot, and they're just waiting and waiting and waiting. At one point, one of them tries to hang himself, but they don't have anything, so he has to use his belt to hang himself, and his pants fall down, and like that's a very Beckettian moments where it's like it's just super. It's very bleak and nihilistic, and at the same time, it's very broad comedy, and I find that like a really like nice register to work in.
Yeah.
So you were very aware that it would all be about death, but the interesting thing is that you postpone death in the novel. Because it all rolls towards a fatal end in which somebody threatens to shoot all the others, but that doesn't happen. But maybe the best place to reflect on death is the moment just before death. So you postpone it. It's not there. I mean, we feel it's coming, but it doesn't come.
I think like there's like a line from like Heidegger. He says, "We are, and we barely know that we are, and we barely know that we do not know this." And I sort of think, from me, I won't speak for everybody, but like it's like right at the moment before my death, I'll go like, "Oh shit, I'm alive," and then wham, Let's buy fur coats,
Well, you say at one point in the novel, somebody walks into a room and thinks the only time you notice things is the first time and the last time. So this must be the last time I'm here. Yeah. I can't remember where in the novel it is. But that's maybe the same thing,
it's
right?
It's PJ. Yeah. When he's about to run away and he's watching. He's driving home with his dad and he's just looking at it's the local shop, it's the football pitch, it's the hotel. And all of these things which are just like, you stop seeing just suddenly when they're taken away from you. You only know what you have when it's gone. Is that what's the Joni Mitchell song? Yeah.
We should keep track of a list of names that have been mentioned.
Sure. Yeah. Heidegger and Joni Mitchell. Let's start there.
We're going to dive into 3 topics, and we're going to start with poverty. And Maaike has prepared. She's going to read an excerpt from the book. That is telling. You can also stand behind the lectern if you...
I will do that.
Yeah. I think it's... Yes, perfect.
Okay.
I'm going to read in Dutch, but I think the text is in English on the screen.
So I will read it in Dutch, and the English is projected over there, I think. I want to introduce the passage. There's Big Mike. He has an automobile shop, garage also. And he's a rich man who is seen as the enemy of the Barneses, who also have a garage that isn't going very well. Imelda, the wife of Dickie, falls in love with Big Mike. And they share together the memories of an extremely poor childhood. Er is een winter geweest, zegt hij, dat we niets te eten hadden. Gewoon dagenlang helemaal niets. Hij lacht weer. Als ik er nu aan terugdenk, lijkt het onmogelijk als een ander land. Maar zo was het. En van mijn vader geen spoor. En mijn ma stuurde ons de deuren langs om mensen te vragen om melk of theezakjes. Of wat ze ook maar hadden. Dat zal ik nooit vergeten, zegt hij, die schaamte. Ja, nee, dat ben jij ook niet vergeten, denkt Imelda bij zichzelf. Hè? Erop uitgaan om te bedelen, huilen in het busje. Een paar tranen konden geen kwaad, vond papa. Maar blauwe plekken gingen te ver. Blauwe plekken maakten de mensen bang. Dan konden ze wel eens vragen gaan stellen of de politie bellen. In straten waar je nog nooit bent geweest. Lach, broer, en jij hand in hand, terwijl papa en de broers om de hoek in het busje wachten. Als je vragen binnen te komen, dan ga je, zei papa. Als je eenmaal binnen bent, moeten ze je wel iets geven. De tuinhekjes van vreemden, de huizen van vreemden, het lawaai van de televisie van vreemden achter de vitrages. Op je tenen naar de deur sluipen om op de bel te drukken. Je hart in je keel, maar je hebt er nooit over gedacht om je om te draaien. Want hoe eng het ook was, niets was zo erg als de gedachte met lege handen aan te komen bij dat busje. Hoe oud was papa toen? Niet oud. Nog niet zo oud als jij nu bent. Maar hij leek in zijn eentje alle monsters uit alle sprookjes tegelijk. Een wolf, een duivel, een trol, een spookkasteel, een berg, een zee. Hoewel soms ook een mollige, jolige reus die je op zijn buik liet stuiteren. Als je maar snapte hoe je hem blij moest maken. En dus drukte je op de bel. De mensen in die huizen, zegt Mike, en hij schudt zijn hoofd. God mag het achteraf weten. Waarschijnlijk hadden ze het zelf ook zwaar. Maar Jezus, wat konden ze je klein laten voelen? Ja, mensen, de schim van hun gezichten. Terwijl ze een rukje aan de gordijnen in de woonkamer gaven. Of een glimp daarbovenuit. Voordat ze de deur dichtgooiden. Geschreeuw van binnen. Niet open doen, dat zijn die zigeuners. Honden die blaften, stenen die gegooid werden. Mannen die daar met een grimmig gezicht stonden en zeiden dat je niet terug moest komen. Of je uitnodigde binnen te komen. Je arm aanraakten, je haar streelden. Ben jij even een mooi juffertje? Kom eens binnen om me mijn toekomst te voorspellen. Ik heb een heel keukenkastje vol lekkere dingen. Je broer kan wel buiten wachten. Gaven je alleen hun afval, zure melk, hun kliekjes, zwarte zakken vol kleren die je geen van allen pasten, een kapot broodrooster, een radiografisch bestuurbare auto waarvan de antenne kapot was. Misschien kun je hier iets mee. Als hij erachter in het busje doorheen broedde, dan brulde papa alsof hij door een stier aan zijn horens gespiest was. Gooide het uit het raam terwijl jullie naar huis reden, stak hij zijn hoofd naar buiten om te vloeken tegen de klaksons die achter ons toeterden. Ik weet nog heel goed dat ik de oprit van die Barneses opliep, zei Mike. Zij waren fatsoenlijk. Als we aanklopten, zorgde Maurice altijd dat we iets kregen. Dickie zat natuurlijk bij me in de klas. Hij doet zijn ogen stijf dicht. Ik was nog liever doodgegaan, Imelda, eerlijk, waar, 7 jaar oud. En ik weet nog heel goed dat ik tegen mezelf zei, ik wou dat ik nu dood kon gaan, in plaats van dat ik op deze deur moet kloppen.
Ja, dankjewel, Maaike. Just really short, what's it like listening to it in Dutch?
it's a very beautiful language.
Yeah? Yeah, okay, good.
So polite.
You're so polite. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing scene. Also, for me, the sentence "But Jesus did make you feel this small" really resonates because it's sort of in the tempo of the.
And he's Big Mike.
And he's Big Mike, right?
Yeah.
And you can feel how small he is. And for you, this was a very important piece in the chapter and in the book, also because it says something to you, which is a bit broader. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I can. It's a scene that comes very late in the book. So you already know Big Mike and you already know Imelda. They have this very poor childhood, but they have become very rich, both of them. Big Mike by starting a business that's successful, and Imelda by marrying Dickie, who took over the garage from his father Maurice, which was doing very well in the beginning. Now the garage of Dickie is going down. He threatens to go broke even. And things fall apart, as you just said. And this trauma of childhood comes back for both of them. So they are enemies in most of the story. Big Mike is the competitor of the Barnes garage, but this difference melts away when they suddenly are reminded of their very poor childhood, and they can share that. Yeah. So, I found that I think the whole book is about traumas don't go away. The book is full of traumas, and one of them that you can try to pretend that you haven't been poor as a child, but your new money falls away or a disaster happens, and suddenly you are so afraid that you will be very poor again and be humiliated and be reduced to nothing. And even the father of Dickie, he seems to be a very great boss, but he has this poor childhood as well. So he also comes from, what's this part of the city called, the ghetto?
Piggery Lane, yeah.
Piggery Lane, yeah. He comes also from there. He worked himself up, started a business, but at some point, as Dickie handles the business badly, his money also is not endless. Then he flees the scene somehow. He goes back to Portugal. So but there are all sorts of traumas, but the poverty trauma was to me a very essential part of the novel.
I think class is a main theme also in that they share that even though it's a relatively small village in the sense that everyone knows each other, still there are all these barriers and boundaries between people, and you sort of play all the time with the masks falling off and people putting them back on. Where did you, or how did you go about thinking about class in this novel? Because you make it such an essential theme that comes back, and then you forget about it for a while, but then it comes back again. How did that work for you?
I think it was really to do with the character of Imelda and sort of the structure of the book. So I was really kind of compelled by this, just the way the kids see their parents, you know. They see their parents in this kind of very flattening, reductive way, and that sort of played out in the first 200 pages of the book. You see Imelda and Dickie exclusively through the kids' eyes. So you, the reader, and me, the writer, you know, I thought Imelda was she's kind of like this vain, smug, kind of one-dimensional person who only cared about, you know, conspicuous consumption and impressing the neighbors and having the latest, whatever it might be, and, you know, taking selfies and stuff. And then when it came to her section, like, excuse me, like when kids, like, when I had my son, like, it kind of struck me that like to him like my past didn't really exist. Like it wasn't kind of meaningful. Like he thought that I was just sort of waiting for him to appear to give my life direction, and maybe I was, you know, not as much as he expected as he thought, but like so much of my life was sort of irrelevant to him because he needed me to be this fixity, because you need your parents to be sort of these, you know, these foundational figures. So they're simultaneously kind of boring and trivial, but at the same time kind of like eternal and monolithic.
But they have no history.
And they've got no history. Well, they've got like, you know, you see like Polaroids of them, you know, it's dad with a mustache, it's dad like with the sandals, it's, you know,
You know, I think it's the other way around as well. And we see this in PJ's part. He has this whole inner life that neither of his parents has access to. I think one of the most poignant scenes between PJ and his mother is the moment both of them realize that they have a past, or they have, and she realizes he has a present. It's the moment that they're in the shoe shop and he has to take off his trainers, and she and he and the salesperson realize at the same time he's been wearing shoes that are way too small, and he's been hiding it from his parents because he knows they've run out of money. And you don't know at that point why this is such an important moment to Imelda. You don't know what she's come from. I think it's such an important moment because he is actually relieved at this point. He's looking his mother into her eyes and he's like, oh, we can finally connect again. She's come back to me somehow because they have one less secret.
That's like, I think like, so I was also interested in the way that like parents flatten their kids as well. You know, you see your kids through this, like you want them always to be 6 years old, you know? Mm-hmm. And like Imelda, like she you know, she's not like an uncaring mother, but she doesn't like, I mean, when kids, like Peter's 12 and he's at that point where he is starting to have secrets, you know, and he is starting to have a life that his parents will never ever know about. And he does have enough kind of knowledge of how the world works to know that they're running out of money. But he blames himself, like he blames himself for everything. Everybody in the book is kind of blaming themselves all the time. They think everything is on their shoulders, you know, like that the family's failing because of them, you know, because PJ's got shoes that are too small, you know, or because Cass is in love with her best friend or whatever it might be. But just to come back to your point about just the class thing, I think so I wanted the Imelda section. So when you get to Imelda's section, it's the first time there is any kind of past in the book, and I wanted it to feel like a real shock. And I wanted her life to feel like radically different to Dickie's, and to be like violent. Like so, it's quite like so when you first go into her past, like it's this kind of quite violent scene with these men attacking a house. But like the more kind of the book kind of progressed, the more like interesting it was to me, the fact that like Dickie, like that scene with Big Mike, like I liked that scene, and that was a surprise to me that. Like it sounds like sort of bullshit. Like if you say like, oh, what a surprise, you know. But it's weird the way you have these plans. So Big Mike is this kind of quite venal character. He's kind of sneaky. He's kind of a boaster. He's this big fat guy. He's always wearing sunglasses, you know. But there's a bit where like he's this fight with Imelda, or he accidentally insults Imelda, and he sends these flowers, and he has this note with the flowers, and like the note was like much more sensitive than I expected it to be. And there was this whole new sort of side of Big Mike kind of opened up. And you figure out that like Dickie will never ever be able to understand Imelda. Like you can't understand someone's past.
But that's also for you as a writer. You start writing on that note, it becomes more sensitive, and then it opens
like,
up.
This is Big Mike, and it was interesting because like when I was editing the book, with my editor in London, I had this kind of very negative view of Big Mike, but she was very smitten with Big Mike, you know. So I thought like Big Mike, he's just you know. So there's this scene with Imelda, and he's got this story about his childhood, and like it's very very sad, but like in Ireland those kind of poverty porn stories, like they're not uncommon, you know. It's like kind of a sort of a thing people. It became a trope for a while with Frank McCourt's book Angela's Ashes, which some of you may have come across.
Right.
So I like at the back of my mind, I thought like, is Mike just telling stories because he's a ladies' man, you know, and he's just trying to. But the editor was like, no way, Big Mike, he's in love with Imelda, and this is how he feels.
And also really short before we go to the next excerpt, because there's also, you said, okay, I wanted Imelda's voice to be radically different from the other chapters. That's also, of course, in the writing style. If there's one thing that people are discussing about, it's the writing style of Imelda. When was for you the moment, or when did you realize that it had to be that different, that it had to be this stream of consciousness?
Without interpunction, I think.
Without interpunction for 200 pages.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're making it sound like it's a very kind of hard to read book. Like it's
No,
not,
it's not.
it's not all about death, and it has some punctuation, but it's all organic. Like it's like I had this. I knew what was going to happen in her section, but when you start writing it, like when you actually start writing it with your body, the new kind of dimensions kind of appear that you weren't aware of. You know, so much of writing is like trying to kind of shake off, you know, your daytime brain, you know, your conscious ego with its plans and its ideas. You know, and what happened with this was like I was writing it. So Imelda's she's driving to this like really awkward sort of dinner, this function. In a hotel near their house, and a lot is riding on this dinner, so she doesn't want it to go wrong, and she's feeling very, very, very anxious. And so I was writing it like, you know, as a normal scene and punctuated normally, but just over a couple of pages, the punctuation just seemed to kind of drop away, because it just wouldn't be the way that she would think. Like she's someone who feels like just to return to your class idea, like my sense of there's a great Yeats quote, like he said, more Yeats, that he said, the poor are, the rich are, but they also seem. So seeming is what like the middle class is all about. And like part of the seeming is like persuading yourself that you've got some sort of knowledge that gives you, you know, the fast pass through, you know, so things are going to work out for you because you're smart and you've got this education. And Dickie's got this like sense of, he feels like he's able to sort of, he just knows how things roll, you know? He's a kind of he's a rich middle-aged guy. He sort of knows how the world works. And even when things go wrong, he still kind of thinks, well, they can only go, you know, they can only go wrong to a certain degree. Whereas like Imelda knows what it's like when you have like nothing, when he knows, like that's something he just can't put himself in that mindset. Like it's really very difficult if you're a middle class person to imagine like opening the fridge and there being like nothing there. Like I mean, I remember like my wife used to teach in this school in inner city Dublin. That was the origin of this inner city novel I didn't write. But you'd say like a lot of the problems with kids doing their homework was that they had no tables. Like there was like literally like no table in the house. And I was like, how can you not have a table? Like that's just crazy. But it's just like, it's a different kind of life.
I think the word that I most thought of when I started reading her voice is frantic. And then at one point, she actually says it. She's talking about how thinking about the future is a privilege for the rich only. And the rest has to be practical, and they have to think about now. And that's the way that she thinks and writes as well. She says everybody else is frantic, trying to dig themselves out of the hole they're in right now. So like the immediacy of the way that she thinks, for me, it makes a lot of sense that it's connected to her past. The way that Dickie can think forwards, backwards, he's always reflecting. There's a peacefulness to it that I'm just now understanding as a class thing.
Yeah, but I was also very interested in the style in which you write the Imelda chapters. When you were talking, I thought, but of course, as an Irish writer, you have James Joyce in your unconsciousness. This is very Joycean, I think, and I was very moved by the marriage scene of Imelda, where she is on the verge of a psychosis, in fact, because she's all the time waiting for the dead Frank, her husband, that was supposed to be her husband, to be there, but he isn't there. And she always almost goes mad, or she, in fact, goes mad. And that's very effectively reflected in the style, I think. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Like it was interesting working. Like I don't know. what a nightmare it must have been to translate for Dirk Jan there, because for me it was like there was no punctuation, and funny, like I met a bookseller in Dublin who said that, you know, frequently people come in and say like my book is broken.
I've heard that it also happens in the Netherlands. It's a misprint.
Yeah, send it to me and I'll put in all the punctuation for you.
Yeah.
But where was I going with that digression? Where was it going?
Joyce?
No, it was before Joyce. It doesn't matter. It'll come back. Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to that, but we'll first read the next excerpt, and that's Charlotte's going to read it. Yeah.
So I'm reading a passage that's from the very beginning of the book, which is Cass's passage. Cass's full name is Cassandra, which is maybe good to remember while you're listening to this. Vorig jaar had Cass voor aardrijkskunde een werkstuk gemaakt over klimaatverandering. Je moest met hulp van je ouders berekenen hoeveel hun werk bijdroeg aan de opwarming van de aarde. Dickie had zich daar volledig in gestort. Hij was dol op huiswerk. Ze waren in de keuken gaan zitten en hadden een lijst gemaakt van alle auto's die de garage had verkocht. Een schatting gemaakt van hoeveel CO2 er nodig was geweest voor de fabrikage ervan en het vervoer hierheen. En berekend hoeveel broeikasgas ze tijdens hun levensloop zouden uitstoten. En aan het eind hadden ze al die getallen bij elkaar opgeteld. Cass kon zich dat moment nog heel goed herinneren. Tot dan was het leuk geweest. Allemachtig, zei pa. Hij keek van de foto die Cass van autobedrijf Maurice Barnes had gemaakt naar de beelden van doorweekte vluchtelingen in Bangladesh, van wie het dorp onder water was gelopen. Dat kan niet kloppen, zei hij, terwijl hij de einduitkomst nog een keer controleerde. Volgens Imelda was hij daarna nooit meer dezelfde geweest. Hij was vegetarische maaltijden gaan bereiden en naar zijn werk gaan fietsen. Waanzin, volgens Imelda. Wat maakt dat voor indruk? Een autoverkoper die op zijn fiets naar zijn werk gaat. Maurice zelf, Cass's grootvader, moest uit Portugal terugvliegen om hem uit zijn hoofd te praten dat hij de voorraad zou uitbreiden om meer elektrische auto's te verkopen. We verkopen niet aan Björn en Agneta, de Zweedse architecten, Dickie, zei hij tegen hem. Hier willen mensen diesel. Ik ben een echte diesel, staat er op de bumpersticker. Niet, ik ben een verrekte sojaboon. Maar het kwaad was geschied, aldus Imelda. Hij heeft er nooit meer zijn schouders onder gezet. En dat allemaal omdat zijn Golden Girl stampij had lopen maken. Ik hoop dat je tevreden bent, dame. Cass kon het niet ontkennen. Het werkstuk had haar ook verontrust. Het was niet alleen de garage. Ze zat zelf ook tot haar nek in de klimaatverandering. Als ze op Instagram keek, een ijsje at, het licht aandeed. Zelfs haar meest alledaagse handelingen lieten een giftig spoor na. Alsof ze een verwoestende schaduw-ik had die de wereld waarin ze leefde verstikte. Wekenlang had ze lopen mokken, verlamd door het onontkoombare van haar eigen kwaadaardigheid. Dan stond ze op de drempel naar de achtertuin te kijken, naar de bloemen, het gras en de bomen in de verte. En stelde ze zich voor dat alles zwart werd, vogels en insecten uit de lucht vielen. Zelfs op fijne dagen, wanneer Elaine haar een armbandje gaf waarvan ze er 2 had, moest ze plotseling weer denken aan alle dieren die zouden uitsterven, de aarde die zou overstromen en aan het feit dat alles verdoemd was dankzij de familie Barnes.
Yeah. People just want fucking diesel. Why did you choose this passage?
Well, I thought I paid attention immediately when I read the name Cass. Usually when a character is named Cassandra in a novel, she's warning against something and then people don't believe her. So I thought it would make a lot of sense for a character like her to get involved in climate panic. And I thought the guilt that she feels when she moves through the world, when she's eating ice cream, when she's doing innocuous things, she feels like she's leaving a trace, like she's leaving a darkness in the world. And this guilt, it's almost unfair that she feels it because she's not the one who runs the car dealership. She's not the one who started the car dealership. She's not the one who invented the car. Yet she's the one who feels the weight and the pressure of this guilt on her shoulders. And I also thought this passage is important to the rest of the novel because there's also the darkness of this specific family is mentioned in there. As if it's... okay, so the family, we would say, is a victim of the economic crisis, is a victim of climate change, but that's not the way they feel it. They feel that these macro events are caused by the family because the family is cursed. So it's not that they are victims, it's that they are perpetrators of these huge world events that they obviously are not to blame for. And so I feel like in a small way, Cass represents that within the family. She's not to blame for any of these things, yet she feels the guilt. And same thing goes for the family. They think they are cursed instead of the fact that they're doomed by the circumstances.
How do you listen to that analysis? I'm just constantly reflecting that we're in a book club with the author reflecting on our reflections.
Sorry, there's a lot at the same time.
No, I wish I was smart enough to answer that. But let me think. So, like when you were talking about tragedy, was it you? Who was talking about tragedy?
I said
sorry,
comedy.
yeah, Mike, you were talking about tragedy. I remember when the book was launched, my editor, Hermione, made a speech, and she said that she had a classics lecturer in Oxford, and he talked about the difference between Greek tragedy and Shakespearean tragedy. And Greek tragedy, the audience would leave thinking, what a shame it had to be that way. But in a Shakespearean tragedy, people would leave thinking, what a shame it could have been different. And in this book, she was going, the point of this introduction was like, I don't know, she said, is this a Greek tragedy or is it a Shakespearean tragedy? And like a lot of the book is about like agency and whether the characters actually have agency, to what degree they're actually trapped in a machine, or is the machine something that is only in their heads? Is the tragedy that they think they're trapped?
But they're prophesied. I read it as they are actually prophesied.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of like ambiguity. Like I think there is prophecy in there, right? So, but I think like that. If you look at climate change, there's this weird kind of dichotomy. There's this weird sort of like I don't know how you put it even, where we simultaneously feel like we're trapped in this machine that we can't get out of, but we also think it's all our fault. Like I'm not Saudi Arabia, you know. I'm not like building any coal plants or anything like that yet. You know, every time I get a plane, I go like, oh my God, like I've just like fucked climate forever, you know. So but that's not true. Like that's a construction of the oil industry. At the same time, it's that kind of I don't know if it's an Irish thing necessarily, but like there's a certain, that narrative makes sense to us. That things are our fault is something that makes sense to us. It makes more sense in a way than feeling that we're. I think what makes it so confusing is that like we simultaneously think that we're like masters of the universe, you know, like as 21st century people, we think we are like the best informed people in the history of civilization, but we also feel like utterly powerless as the species, you know, hits like this wall at like 1,000 miles an hour, which is like that's, how do you make sense of that?
Yeah.
Well, I guess Willie at one point has a speech when he's become a politician. And he says, like, it's a terrible motivator to blame yourself. If you want to get people to act, you cannot blame them. And I read it and I was like, oh, I agree. But then there's no alternative but blaming yourself, right? There's no alternative but thinking that it's your own fault, because all you can change is the things in your own life.
Like, that's true. I think that, like, so when I was writing the book, like, I was, and again, like, I had this big kind of conversation with the editor about this. The first time that she came back to me about the book, we had this like 3-hour Zoom. It was completely exhausting, but it was just interesting because no one had seen the book. You know, I'd been working on this for however many years, 3.5 years or something, and I was pretty anxious about it. But I was like, so Dickie is to blame for a lot of the things that happen, you know, but Cass isn't to blame. Like she's definitely not to blame, and that's sort of where. So for me, like where the rubber hits the road is like when you take children into account. You know, when there's people who are definitely not players in the situation at all.
But I think there's also something very hopeful in this scene. Like there is this father-daughter moment in which someone who has been growing up in the idea of that automobile company and has been invested in that narrative for so long tries to change course because of a homework thing of his daughter, right? I mean, if there's an entrance to maybe change something, then it's through Cass for him. Yeah.
No, you're true. That's true. Like it's not a it's not a kind of like a pitch black picture of the. It's like, you know, so when I was speaking yesterday in Brussels to Colin Walsh, he's a great Irish novelist, a young guy, and he was saying that, like, sort of traditionally in Irish novels, like the dad is this kind of silent, brooding figure, you know, and it's unusual to have a dad who's, you know, he's caring, and he loves his kids, and he's not afraid to show them that. And Cass, there's hope there. Like there is kind of a way out, but but it's like they're all wearing blindfolds, you know, and like we're watching them kind of like wander around like beside a cliff, and you're just like, take off the blindfolds, but they can't do it.
Maaike?
I also found it very realistic, this picture of the kids worrying about the climate, because it's true now that people who are very young are much more worried about the climate often than people who are grown up. But I also saw this scene that's quite in the beginning of your novel as a kind of mise en abîme, or a kind of metaphor for the novel as a whole. So it's just this picture of the climate will be a huge problem, and it will go
It's going to be the end of us.
Yes,
yes,
indeed. And the novel as a whole has the same plot, of course.
Yeah.
So I find that very interesting, that construction, that there's already this premonition, as you say, to the figure of Cassandra for the novel as a whole.
Yeah. It's funny, like how sort of things are kind of latent in the book, you know, that I don't even realize, you know, as I was writing it, that then sort of kind of emerge as kind of major themes.
Yeah.
So things that appear as funny, you know, so that scene with Cass is funny. But at the same time, like a lot of the book is about Cass's disappointment in Dickie. Like she, you know, she's at a point in her life, and PJ is too, where like this dad, and you saw that a bit with Imelda actually as well there. So where Imelda thinks about her father used to be like the sky and the sea and the mountain and so on, and Cass and PJ, they've grown up in this place where dad is just you know, he's making everything happen. He's got all this money. He's creating this world around him. And now she's realizing that he can't, you know, his powers are limited. He's just like a flawed mortal, you know. And she has to, he can't help her, you know. Yeah.
We're going to go to the last excerpt, and Mike is going to read that. And then we're going to dive into a topic that's also, well, throughout the entire book, I would say, toxic relations and how those work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So for this fragment, the situation is this one. Dickie sits with his friend Victor in a bunker in the woods that they have dug out. And they both firmly believe in complot theories. The bunker will be their safe hiding place when war breaks out. And Dickie has made an appointment with Richard, or Richard with him, and Richard blackmails him. And Richard announces that he will come to the bunker to collect his money. And Victor plans to shoot him so that Dickie will get rid of this devil. And Dickie feels very trapped in this situation. Now he will murder a man. And however did he get there, he wonders. And then he hears an inner voice within himself, don't do this. And it is as if a man talks to him, his other self, the other Dickie, and tells him, tell the truth. You have to tell that you stole money from the garage because you were blackmailed. You still can stop this. And your children will not have a murderer as a father. So this is the dialogue between Dickie en himself. Je verheft je stem in een jammerkreet, zodat je hem niet zult horen. Maar je hoort hem toch. Wil je dat je kinderen zo leven, dat ze zichzelf verstoppen uit schaamte voor wie ze zijn? Is dat wat je in 1000 jaar voor ze zou willen? Dickie, hij wrikt je handen voor je ogen vandaan. Dickie, ik ga niet liggen, het wordt afschuwelijk. Voor hen en voor jou. Ze zullen gekwetst raken, getraumatiseerd. Ze zullen het niet begrijpen. Ze zullen je in de steek laten. Hij buigt zich naar je toe, fluistert. Maar ze zullen terugkomen. De bomen draaien om je heen als een op hol geslagen carousel. En zijn gezicht gaat met ze mee de lucht in. En ze worden een waas. Maar zijn stem komt duidelijk en beheerst door. Je kinderen houden van je, zegt hij. Ze zullen een manier vinden om het te begrijpen. Imelda ook, zelfs zij. Dat is wat liefde is. Die is groter dan de feiten. Groter dan de som van wat je hebt gedaan. Je kunt klaar zijn met dat valse leven, de goede dingen ervan meenemen, opnieuw beginnen. Je hoeft alleen maar vertrouwen te hebben in de mensen die van je houden, zegt hij. Je hoeft alleen je hart maar open te stellen voor de liefde. Hij glimlacht. Hoewel het onmogelijk lijkt, kijken zijn loensende ogen op een of andere manier recht in de jouwe. En zijn hand komt omhoog om je wang te strelen. Je haalt diep adem. Laat zijn zachte lippen zacht op de jouwe vallen. Laat je zware oogleden dichtvallen. Dan doe je ze weer open. Victor heeft de open plek betreden met iets in zijn hand. Dit is voor jou, zegt hij. Hij geeft je een voorwerp aan dat in een plastic tas verpakt is. Heb ik op dark web besteld, zegt hij. Ze hebben het me in 50 afzonderlijke fucking zakjes toegestuurd. Heb het laatste net binnengekregen. Heb jij even mazzel? Je haalt het uit de tas. Het is lang, zwaar, van zwart metaal. Een cilinder met uitsteeksels. Een gemuteerd neefje van iets wat je herkent. Je moest het zelf in elkaar zetten, zegt Victor. Ziet er een beetje raar uit, maar het schiet prima. Heb het op kraaien op mijn wijtje achter geprobeerd. Doe maar, probeer maar eens. Dat hoeft niet, zeg je. Je laat je hand langs de loop glijden. Je voelt de energie er doorheen zoomen. Net als met die kleerhangers van ijzerdraad toen je wiggelde naar water. Alsof het vol geesten zit. Alsof er geesten vanuit de donkere hemel neerdalen om het te vullen. Er klinkt een ratelend geluid. Victor kijkt omlaag naar zijn uitgestrekte handpalm. Daar heeft hij iets in liggen. Eerst denk je dat het tanden zijn plattelandstanden. Dan laat hij ze in zijn geweer. Met wie was je daarnet aan het praten, zegt hij. Niemand, zeg je. Je klapt je geweer open om de kogels in ontvangst te nemen.
Ja, dankjewel. I mean, Victor is also such an interesting character because he is swirling around the family, and you see his presence getting more and more dominant in the life of Dickie, and then they wander into the woods, which is also sort of such a physical representation of them not being at home anymore, them not being themselves anymore, and Dickie, who has been through so much. Who has been having a love affair, who has felt real love, who has been studying, but then he falls into the hands of Victor with all his complot theories. How do you look at their relationship? If you, I mean,
yeah,
it's spiraling down, right?
No, it's definitely like it's Dickie's So I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm really sorry about spoilers for anybody who's still kind of working their way through the book. But like, some of it's kind of
It's
hard.
still worth it.
It's still, Well, thank you. I guess, like, so Dickie has this relationship when he's a young man, and he leaves it behind to become the father and to take over the family business, and he never really manages to fill that void. He sort of tells himself that he's filled it, but then he kind of consistently makes these like just terrible choices in an effort to get it back. So he tries to find Willie again, and when he can't find Willie, he gets into another relationship, and then like the actual the absolute like bottom is rock bottom is he falls under the spell of Victor, who's this kind of so I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if this happens here, but sometimes you'll hire like a tradesman, like, or a builder or something like that, and they'll come to the door and you'll go like, oh no, this isn't going to work out. So Victor is that guy. He's really just kind of
I love how much Imelda hates him.
Yeah, Imelda sort of. He keeps like fixing the house, and then he has to come back and fix it again. And Dickie and he kind of bond over this love of terrible stories from history. So they're both really into books about genocide and that kind of thing. But Victor appears like someone who's when Victor is at work in the forest building this crazy bunker, he seems like he is master of this domain, and Dickie's like got to a point in his life where he's sort of just. Dickie never really trusts anybody because he doesn't trust himself, and he's always worried, without even realizing it, that he's going to be exposed as a liar. So he thinks he's got this very kind of dark view of misanthropic view of people. He's waiting for the town to turn on him and destroy him. So for him, like, prepping makes kind of sense, in this kind of like crazed state that he's gone into. He feels like the only thing he can do is retreat into the woods and hide. So you want to?
Well, I think you show very well that how men, or maybe people in general, but maybe also men, are vulnerable to falling into those complot theories. You become an adherent of complot theories when, as a kind of last resort. Then you understand the world. Then you know what to do and with whom to do it. So indeed, he studied. He has an academic background. He has a wife. He has kids that he very much loves. But still, he takes the road to destruction, in a way.
Yeah, he did. Well,
horrible.
Yeah, I guess it's like it's. Well, there's this. I don't know if this is relevant actually, but like there's this famous Mark Fisher line, like, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, and for Dickie, it's easier to imagine like everything in the world being destroyed than his mask being taken off. He would rather like just wipe out everything, like literally, than be found out for people to know who he really is, which is obviously like insane. At the same time, it's the way that I think like a lot of us think. We're not in that sort of extreme situation, but people will extend.
But it's almost like, late at night, thoughts come creeping to people. You start to be a bit hysterical sometimes about things because you think there's no solution, but then you go to bed and the next morning the solution is sometimes hopefully right in front of you, but it's like they never go to bed.
Yeah.
And they never wake up the next morning and look at each other like, what are we doing with each other?
Yeah, completely. Like, it's just he's come sort of unmoored from his regular life, and he's in his woods. And
but the drama of this section is that Dickie knows that there's an alternative. He talks to himself. Don't do this.
It's Victor in that. It's Victor in that scene. He's sort of imagining Victor. I think that Dickie's very lonely, and he just wants someone to love him. And he's so desperate that he imagines Victor, who is incapable of
even looking someone in the eye.
He imagines that Victor is the one to say use your sense.
It's very vague, you know. But that's how I kind of thought of it. But it's all like a fantasy.
I was also struck by the extreme taboo on homosexuality in the whole book. That Dickie is so afraid to tell anything about his homosexual desire, and he has also this need to be punished, so he always chooses horrible men like Sean and Victor and Richard. So he all the time he wants to confess it. He wants to go to his father and say, "I'm sorry, I'm gay. I have robbed the business. I am extorted. Help me." And that would be probably. And he knows in a way maybe Maurice would understand if he would confess all of this, and he doesn't do it. He's on the verge of doing it. It's very dramatic.
But he was a very religious boy growing up, and he's convinced of that the crime of homosexuality is against nature. He says it's a very specific, very pernicious kind of evil because it undid the natural things it touched. So not only is it unnatural to be homosexual, but it would destroy the things that are natural, which is the family, the home.
But I suddenly thought maybe this is still very strong in Ireland. In the Dutch context, this psychology would be unthinkable by now. Even this is 25 years ago, maybe historically.
Is it?
In what time do we live, or is in the present time? In the present
what's
time.
What's the question? No, it's 2014. That's when
2014.
Yeah.
But and also this the toxic relation between Cass and her girlfriend Elaine is very similar to the toxic relations that Dickie has. Cass is very oppressed by Elaine. Is in fact in love with Elaine. Is always on the point of I have to tell her, and then doesn't do it. That struck me like very dramatic and a disaster, because the whole plot would change if they would open up.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that they don't think they deserve love. I think that's the problem. I think Dickie doesn't think that Morris would forgive him. I think that Dickie thinks that Morris would be ashamed to have a son who's gay. And I think that Cass feels that Elaine would be ashamed to have a friend who is in love with her. So I think that's where it is. Like, the sexuality is part of it, but it's more sort of that. It's kind of almost deeper than that. It's like that they just don't see themselves as worthy of love, you know. And I think like that's not specific to Ireland.
No, but the silence might be.
But this severe taboo on homosexuality is that struck me.
So homosexuality. So Ireland was like a theocracy, and it was really sort of a very like a monoculture. So like basically, like 98% of Ireland's population when I was growing up was like white and Catholic, you know.
Yeah.
And if you're different, you left, you know, because so that sort of reinforced the sameness of everyone who was there. So homosexuality was decriminalized in 1993, but it's still like a major, at that point, was still a major, seen as like a bad thing, you know. It was a bad thing to be gay. It was a corrosive thing that damaged society in the way that the quote you read, that's totally right. But then, like, things did change, and there was a Marriage Equality Act in, I think, 2014, where people, like, you know, people voted for gay people to be allowed to be married, you know, and there was, like, I can't describe what a sea change that was for a country like Ireland. I had friends, like gay friends, who were knocking on doors and talking to, like, people who were, like very different to them, like people from, like, working class backgrounds, or people sort of, you know, like, who were, like, old enough to be very sort of rooted in that Catholicism, but just telling them their stories, and those people, you know, that that referendum was won by like a landslide, you know?
Yeah.
And it was it was such a wonderful thing, because the country had seemed so cruel to anybody who was vulnerable or different, and suddenly there was this kind of new inclusivity, and I thought that was like such a step forward. And I think the tragedy of Dickie is that he's not able to believe that people can do this. You know, he doesn't believe that people can surprise you. You know,
Yeah, or even love him, because
Or-
actually Willy or the German girl that Cass meets, they have exits. They have people that bring the good side
Yeah, sure.
out of them.
Yeah. So like, I guess I wanted with the kids, like, you know, I wanted to show that like there's hope. Like things can be, things can get better.
I want to go to audience questions, because I think we've been talking quite a lot, but I guess we haven't been through the entire book yet. We still have some pages left. If I can get a bit more light in the... Yeah. Is there anyone who has a question or remark? Or was it all crystal clear?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Does this lady want to?
Do you want to ask a question? Oh, you just...
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, please, because otherwise the stream,
You mentioned earlier about the automobile dealership and how it came crashing down for a couple of reasons, both the global economic reasons and then through Dickie's own efforts, so to speak. I'm wondering if you could have had Dickie have a different job, or were you consciously making it an automobile dealership with its connection to climate change and saying more when you chose him to be a, car salesman?
Yeah.
Yeah, like thank you for the question. It was one of those beautiful moments of like serendipity that arrive if you're lucky when you're working on a book. I mean, I had a friend whose dad worked in the car industry, and his business went down, and she told me that story like years and years ago, and it always sort of stayed with me. The way that he felt the townsfolk turned on him and blamed him, for the business failing when it had nothing to do with him, so he could have been something different, but then the car industry was the perfect business for Dickie, because like the car is just like the perfect symbol of, like, I always feel like a student when I say capitalism, but just forgive me. So a perfect symbol of like capitalism is just like, I'm an individual, I'm the master of my own life, I'm driving down like a winding country road, I'd like sort of got the window open and stuff. And that's not what it's like to own a car. Certainly in Dublin, if you own a car, you're just stuck in traffic at like 0 miles an hour, swearing at all the people around you. So it's like this vision of individuality that like when everybody does it, just like automatically stops working, And that's basically that's where we are. So in short, that was I felt like, and in terms of the economics of it, this Celtic Tiger that I mentioned very briefly, the one that hit, what everybody did was go out and buy a new car. So if you were a car dealer, you were made. But then when the crash came, just the sales, like no other business was hit as badly as the car industry in Ireland. It was just wiped out.
But nobody can hear you.
Yeah, you still need the microphone if you want to do a short edition. Yeah.
It is a very deep and profound metaphor for capitalism and for individualism and the idea of success, and in America at least, adulthood. Everyone remembers the first car that they bought and what they did in it, and they give it names and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
of course, you're totally right. It's like the promise of freedom. It's like it's the embodiment of freedom, but it's this freedom that's like poisoning the air that we breathe. So it's got this, terrible dark side.
I think there's a question there also.
Yeah, I'm almost afraid to ask a question because thank you so much for writing this book. It was so beautiful that it feels strange to break the fourth wall or something. So I'm honored to be able to ask actually 2 questions. I'm sorry. But one thing that I'm so intrigued by Victor, and I was wondering if you made me consider writing a 5th chapter. He felt so much as a part of the family that I felt cheated by not knowing his background, but I know everyone's background and perspective. And I would wonder like how he perceived the family and what his story was. So if you can reveal something about that, I'd love that. And second question, is like I left the book thinking that I didn't know you must have a teenage daughter and you don't. And I was like, how does this middle-aged man, as you said yourself, know so well how to write a teenage daughter that I felt also cheated by that so many people don't seem to understand teenage girls, but you really did, so thanks.
Oh,
Great questions, yeah.
thank you. Thank you for the question and thank you for the kind words. So Victor is just, my landlord when I was renting before I moved into my house. Sorry, is that a very, did I reveal too much there? So when I was writing my second book, I lived for 7 years in this big house with five other people, and it was like a wonderful time in my life. It was quite a sort of a chaotic house. It was like that movie Together, if anyone's ever seen that Swedish movie Together. Yeah, it's but the landlord was this classic Irish landlord, which is to say he was like a lot of landlords, like old landlords in Ireland, they used to be policemen, and they sort of got into property, and they owned like loads of he owned loads of houses, but he did everything like as cheaply as he possibly could. So if something wasn't working, if the cooker wasn't working, he had this lackey, this kind of like like sort of an Igor figure, who sort of like lurch in, and like put tape on things or nail something over. And so I kind of had that sort of person in mind, this kind of Mr. Fix-It, who was just like profoundly like incapable of fixing anything. So I really like those sort of, to be more kind of literary about it, those kind of like trickster figures, or like Caliban, like in Shakespeare's play, Caliban is like this strange kind of beast who's arisen out of the island, and he's kind of savage, but he's also got this weird power over the environment that the others don't have. So yeah, I was thinking about him too, and there's a hardware store near the house that I own, where it's this crazy hardware store run by these two old guys, and you're never allowed in the door. Like if you want something, you just ask them. You say, "Do you have like a torch?" And they'll go inside, and there'll be some sort of, then they'll come out with a torch. But someone said to me once, like, "Do you know the house up the street? Like that's where they live." And it was a house I go past every single day on the way to school with my kids. And the two guys from the hardware store live in this like little house, but it's got like 8 CCTV cameras, like just like at different angles all over the place. Like, and I don't know what they're expecting to happen, but it's not good. What was the other?
The second question was how a middle-aged man can write so well about Cass.
Okay, I mean,
when you have no daughter.
I'm just keep hitting the middle-age thing. It's just
sorry about that.
There's no getting around it. Like,
you never realized it in a way.
I had to take when I was in Brussels. There was an interview, and there was a photographer at the interview, and we were sort of backstage in this theater, and there's a big mirror, and for the actors to put on their makeup before the shows, there's a mirror. And the counter was also a mirror. So the photographer said, let's take a picture of you and we'll have you sort of reflected infinite times in front of like the mirror and the mirror and the mirror. So for about like 5 minutes, I was just staring at myself in the mirror.
And then it hit you.
I was like, fuck, I'm middle-aged.
Cass.
Oh, Cass, the teenage girl. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I mean, I feel like so. The message of the book, like, there's no message, but I feel like people are not as different as they think they are. Like, people have more in common than they realize, and like, what's more different than a middle-aged man and a teenage girl? It feels like there's no bridge between those two people. At the same time, there's the same vulnerabilities, there's the same, loneliness in the case of Dickie and of Cass. That said, I was really interested in girl dynamics. We were discussing this earlier today. Dynamics that don't exist in male friendships, really. This strange kind of like falling in love that you see with girls that can turn to this very destructive kind of. Do you want to jump in there, or?
No, I think you're summarizing it very well.
Okay.
We were talking about this a double-edged sword of wanting to be each other, but then having to destroy each other, and how boys never seem to have this in their friendships. But you do seem to understand it very well. How did you find out about our secret?
The secret internet? Is this other internet? No?
She knows, I know.
On the dark web.
The dark web, yeah. I was really interested in this thing of like I want to turn into you. You know, I like you so much that I want to be you. Like I don't know that really exists for boys. You know. And I thought that was really fascinating. And there's a couple of books that I really loved, like the Elna Ferrante books, of My Brilliant Friend, where, you know, she's really, that whole thing between Lenu and Lena, where Lena is just this, Lena's just this perfect being who just is. And Lenu, she's so brilliant.
Too cerebral.
She's too cerebral. So she can't just be. She's always going like, how can I be in the world, you know? And Lena just seems to inhabit the world so perfectly. So yes, that was so. I don't know, just books, I guess, and yeah.
Books, I guess. That's a great answer. Let's go to the last question at the back.
First of all, I agree with the others. I think the book was really well written from the women's perspectives, especially Imelda's part. First, I thought, oh, this very beautiful woman is made stupid. Why? She doesn't even know how to put like punctuation marks. But then overall, we understand how complex she is, and actually, she's quite smart. She never had the education. But actually, what I found missing in the book, or purposely left out, was the friendships. Literally no one in the family has a good friend. Frank had a good friend that, I forgot his name, but they go to Dublin together. But I wanted to ask you did you on purpose make all the characters unable to get real friendships? Because Imelda struggles with this, Cass struggles with this, PJ is basically used by his friends. But I actually see in female friendships a lot that there's a lot of support. Yep. And Imelda's friends seems to have it between each other. They tell each other they cheat, etc. But Imelda is just not able to open up, except his brother Lar and to Big Mike. So I wanted to ask why this was on purpose left out.
That's a great question. I think that they're lonely. They really feel like they like. I think it comes back to what I was trying to say about just them not feeling like they deserve to be loved, like they don't value themselves. So like I think that like PJ does have friends. He's got this friend called Zargam in school, but unfortunately because his parents won't send him to summer camp, he doesn't get to see Zargam. And also like Zargam's parents are kind of suspicious of, you know, because the whole family, like the whole town is talking about this family. So the kids are sort of there, you know, kids pick up everything. So the kids are just getting the vibes of, you know, things are not right with this Brown's family. So PJ is sort of, and he's stuck with this awful kid, Nev, instead. But that's like, it's tough. Like, I guess, you know, like sort of the idea was that like, you know, you have to take a chance. You have to take a chance on people, you know, and you have to trust, like the part that you read so beautifully. Like you had to. You have to trust that people will listen to you and people will be there for you. And if you don't, then you're in a bad place.
Just to wrap it up, are you still working on the fantasy novel that was going to be so long?
Yeah, I am. So I'm working on a children's book, which is I don't know if it's a children's book that children will want to read. But it's certainly a lot of fun for me to write, so hopefully that counts for something.
And I heard the Bee Sting is you're thinking about, or it's starting to become a television series.
So I'm working on a script for, you know, we'll see what happens. Television is really, hard to figure out.
Sort of black box, yeah.
It's hard to get things made, you know. Yeah. But I think it's there's it's. The books sort of, you know, people have responded to it in lots of places where I wouldn't have thought they'd respond to it. So give it a go.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much, and I think the people that are here and have been listening to you, I mean, it must be a pleasure to see so many people mesmerized by the book.
For an hour and a half, folks. God bless you. Yeah, Jesus.
So we're going to get a drink, because
Yes.
also we have almost something to celebrate. I also heard you're going to be signing books, if people want. And I also, because I see that many people have read the book or reading it, but it's also birthday season and spring, so I'm going to do a little bit of upselling. You can buy books for people you think that should read the book, so don't be shy on that, because I think more and more people deserve to read the book. So I want to thank Maaike Meijer, I want to thank Charlotte Remarque for their take on the book and their contributions. Let's go have a drink, but not before we have given a great round of applause for Paul Murray.
Thank you.